of Inspire FM, the time is now 7 o'clock.
Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Welcome to another episode of Send in the Community. My name is Hafiz Muhammad Umar, and I'm delighted to be joined by Sheikh Mahdi Lock for this show today. Sheikh Mahdi, welcome to you.
Alaikum assalam wa barakatuh. Welcome. Thank you for the invitation.
And Jazakallah khair for taking the time to join us. Listeners who have been tuning in for the last few weeks will know that we started this new initiative called Send in the Community. Send stands for Special Education Needs and Disabilities. And I'm Hafiz Muhammad Umar. I'm a qualified Senko by profession. And our aim is to try and raise profile of special education needs and disabilities within our community. And we have been touching on a different topic each week, alhamdulillah, since Ramadan. We talked about autism and then disability sport, and then we looked at adult social care. And last week we talked about hearing impairment with our focus on Islam for deaf. And today we are going to be discussing the challenges around mental health and well-being, and having a focus on anxiety and depression. And one of the reasons why Sheikh Mahdi has, mashallah, been invited to the show today is because he's done something quite amazing. He's one of the authors of a book entitled Depression and Anxiety, Treatments and Causes according to the Quran. And we are going to be, inshallah, talking to Sheikh Mahdi about his journey so far in life to where he is at the moment, and also the underpinning reasons for this particular book. Listeners, this is a recorded show, so please don't phone in today, but you can leave your comments or messages, and inshallah we can try to pick them up after the show. So Sheikh Mahdi, if you could please give us a bit of introduction to yourself, and then we'll talk about your work.
Okay. Alhamdulillah, SubhanAllah, where do you want me to start? It can be a long, confusing story for some people. And some people think I'm making it up.
Just a brief summary of your life, inshallah. What inspired you towards looking into Islam, and then your journey since. Because you have, mashallah, you could probably write a whole book on your journey so far. But just a brief summary, inshallah.
Yeah. There's a book out there called The Big Step, but so I would say let's talk about how I got to this book. I've been Muslim for about 25 years now, almost 25 years. That's when you and I met way back, because we were at Leeds University.
Yes, first university in the year 2000, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, way back then. And in the Arabic department. So I was doing Arabic and history. I think you were you doing just Arabic? Or?
Yes, I was in Arabic studies.
Just Arabic studies. So I was Arabic and history joint honors, and then that involved also going to Morocco for a year abroad. Spent a year in Fez. So I got really into the Arabic language, and I really focused on making myself capable of teaching Arabic and from translating from Arabic. So that's what I do. I'm now that's my title, so to speak. I'm a language consultant, so I do translating, editing, teaching, tutoring, even advising on Arabic textbooks and these kinds of things. I was just last week I was in Morocco for a conference on Arabic textbooks for non-native speakers. I was giving a presentation and so forth. So, but within the scope of everything that I do, again, is translating a lot of books. And I've been focusing, I've done a lot of works by classical scholars, like Imam al-Suyuti and Imam al-Nawawi and Imam al-Ghazali and so forth, rahimahumullah. But I've also done a lot of works by contemporary scholars, like Imam Muhammad al-Sha'rawi. I did a lot of his tafsir. Imam Hamid al-Bulthi, Imam Musul al-Bagha, Imam Muhammad Ta'wil from Morocco. So within these books by Imam al-Bulthi, I've done I don't know, 7, 8, quite a few books now. And with my friend Hazmi, And Hazem Nasser, who's mentioned on the cover, and he's my co-author. We have a long history because we were actually at school together in Denmark way back in the 1990s. And he's like the major person who brought me to Islam. So he speaks Arabic and English like a native. So we were good friends for like that period of like 1996 roughly in the Gregorian calendar up until about 2000. And then we obviously went our separate ways to university and whatnot. But we maintained touch. We kept in touch, and he does the checking for my translator, especially Mama. So what happened was we came across a TV series, actually, Mama Bolti did, because Imam Muhammad Imam Bolti, who passed away in 2013, rahimahullah, which would have been, that would have been like 1434. He did a long, he did a lot of radio and TV material. In addition to writing, there's all of them have different sort of strengths that they engage in. So like someone like Imam Muhammad Zuhaili, for example, who had just published a book by Quds, he was a writer. He's predominantly a writer, right? He would dedicate, maybe 16 hours a day, 18 hours a day to writing. Whereas Imam Bolti did writing, but as well as a lot of just recording in terms of classes and lectures and TV shows and so forth. So he did this long TV show, long series, I should say TV series, called Dirasat Quraniya, Quranic studies. And under that, he did different subjects within it, right? So you might do something on like the Messenger of Allah Sallallahu in the Quran, or shukr in the Quran, gratitude in the Quran. And then one of these series was called Al-Ka'ab, right? I.e. depression in the Quran. And it was 10 episodes. Each episode was about half an hour. And so we listened to it. We loved it. So we thought, okay, we can turn this into a book, right? We could just transcribe it, translate it, summarize it. And alhamdulillah, I'm in touch with the Imam's family, right? I'm in touch, regular contact with his grandson. So we got permission from the Imam's family. One of the things that was said to us was that Imam Bolti, in comparison to Imam Sha'rawi, he did not allow for anything, any of his audio video material to be transcribed and then attributed directly to him. So we had to say that this is based on the series. So the book doesn't say like literally by Imam Bolti, but it's based on the series by Imam Bolti, and that was good. That was a blessing in and of itself, because that allowed us to summarize and to and to sort of make it more adaptable to being a book, right? So obviously we can't call it episode 1, episode 2. We have to call it chapter 1, chapter 2. We don't say welcome to the new episode, ladies and gentlemen. We got rid of all that stuff, and then while we were doing it, Hazem pointed out some interesting things that we could change. So for example, when Imam Bolti did this series, and I'm guessing he would have done this maybe 20 years ago or more, he would talk about the differences. When we talk about depression, anxiety, he would talk about the differences between Western societies and Islamic societies. But then my friend Hazem pointed out, because he's from Egypt and he lives in Dubai, so he pointed out, he said, yeah, but a lot of these things that you see in the West, quote unquote, have gone around the world, right? A lot of issues regarding to depression and anxiety that you see in the Western world, they exist in the Muslim world now too, right? So we changed that. We said, okay, we just said, there are Islamic societies and there are secular societies. And the reader can decide what he thinks are the Islamic societies or the secular societies, right? We're not going to prejudice anyone. We're not going to say, this country is wicked and secular and this country is wonderful and Islamic, because someone will come along and say, hey, that's not it. So we just left it to the reader to decide what he thinks or she thinks is more Islamic or secular. So alhamdulillah, so what the Imam does and what we've put together in the book is what he's talking about. And I laid this out very clear in the introduction, because I am aware, and you and I were talking about this before, and I'm very well aware of the legal repercussions. So I'm not coming to you in this book as a mental health professional in any way, shape, or form. I'm really coming to you. This book is really a book of what you might call like a book of ihsan or tazkiyah. That's really what it is. So what the Imam is doing is And I say, yes, I say in the introduction, I say, while the topic is on depression and anxiety, do not view this book as a manual of conventional psychology.
Mhm.
And I mentioned as well that the word psychology, if you look in the Oxford English Dictionary,
Mhm.
right, the Monogena, the authority for the English language, yes, psychology used to mean the science of the science or the study of the soul or the spirit. It used to mean
Mhm.
that, but now it is a purely material meaning,
Mhm.
right? It's just the study of the mind, right?
Mhm.
So so this book is psychology in the older sense of the meaning,
Mhm.
but not in the modern conventional sense of the meaning.
Mm.
Um,
Let me pause you there, Sheikh Mahdi, just for any listeners who are tuned in now. You're listening to Send in the Community with me, Hafiz Muhammad Umar, and I'm absolutely delighted to have Sheikh Mahdi Lock with me today. And we are talking about mental health and well-being with a focus on depression and anxiety. And Sheikh Mahdi, mashallah, is a co-author of a book entitled Depression and Anxiety. Yeah, there we are, the causes and treatment according to the Quran. And this book, mashallah, really goes into what the Quran offers us in terms of around anxiety, depression, and that's mashallah. Wanting to have a contribution to our radio show. May Allah bless
Allah.
her. Give a couple of years
She's just crying. She's not depressed. Don't worry.
No. I think she's just probably missing her daddy.
Yeah.
Joining me in this meeting. So that's where we are at the moment with today's show, talking about depression and anxiety, according to the Quran, and what solutions we might be able to find in our religion. So, Sheikh Mahdi, please continue.
Okay. So what Imam Abulti does, and that's why I explained in the introduction, is that so we've established this point that he's talking about the fact that depression and anxiety are not material illnesses. This is what obviously you're told to believe in a secular paradigm, but these are spiritual illnesses. These are related to the state of your spirit. So what he goes into is what he calls underlying causes or hidden causes for depression. So people might think on the surface, they might say, well, so-and-so is depressed because he lost his job, or so-and-so is depressed because of a divorce or because of a death in the family, and so on and so forth, right? Whereas Imam Abultis says, no, there's something deeper there that, or there are deeper causes or underlying causes that are not considered, and they're especially not considered a secular paradigm. We don't think about these things. So, and then what he brings it back to is he says that really, if you're feeling depressed or anxious, and especially the advice that don't jump to the conclusion that you are mentally ill. Really, what you have to understand and explore and investigate is your relationship with Allah. You have to look at your relationship with Allah, because there's always, and this should not be controversial, there's always room for improvement, right? You're not a prophet, you're not an angel. There's going to be something that you can be doing to draw near to Allah, and there's going to be things that you should stop doing to draw near to Allah, right? Everyone's got good habits that they can pick. Everyone's got habits they can leave off in terms of their worship and their adhkar and their du'as every day. There's always room for improvement. And then the final point he makes in this introduction, which I put in the introduction based on what he says, is that learning about depression and anxiety is not going to remove the tribulations you have in your life, right? Because Allah says in Surah, I think it's Surah Al-Baqarah 155, Allah says, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. Right? So Allah said in the ayah, Allah says, we will most assuredly test you. Right? There's a lot of emphasis on that ayah. This is Surah Al-Baqarah against ayah 155, right? With something. Fear and hunger and so forth. So the tribulations are going to be there. You don't have to find the tribulations or chase down the tribulations. The tribulations will find you. But obviously knowing about depression and anxiety will prepare you for how to deal with them. So what comes through and what we put in the book and in multiple books I've translated is then when we talk about tribulation and anxiety, is that you can never measure tribulation or tribulation and tests and so forth. You can never measure them in terms of the outward, in the sense that you can say, okay, well, so-and-so so and so is more depressed than so and so because he had 3 deaths in the family. This guy had 2, or this guy lost 10,000 pounds. This guy lost 5, or this person is literally happy because he has a big house and a big car and a 6-figure salary, and this person over here must be really depressed because he's disabled and blind and poor. That's not how you look at it at all. Really, how you measure tribulation, how it affects people, is how it affects the heart and how it affects the soul, right? So the person with the 6-figure salary, he could be, he might be very stressed. He might not sleep well at night because he's always worried about his investments and worried about his properties and worried about the next business deal, whatever he's going to do. Whereas the person who's blind and disabled and poor could be content with Allah, and he accepts his position. So just no, before you ask me that question, so that's why before we talk, I mentioned that ayah. Allah says, "Ya ayyuhan nasu qad ja'atkum maw'idhatun min rabbikum wa shifaa'un lima fi sudur." This is Surah Yunus, the 10th chapter, verse 57. Allah says, "Mankind, admonition has come to you from your Lord, and also healing for what is in the heart."
And that is amazing, subhanAllah. And as we were talking there, I was thinking of this another common understanding within the Western world, that when you're measuring standard of life versus quality of life, there are 2 main distinctions. You touched on that, the fact that a person perhaps with a huge house, luxurious way of life, there's this almost a false precedence that person would be at peace. And actually, that isn't always the case. Quality of life could well mean a far more peace, even if you're in a smaller house, you're not very well off financially, but if your heart is content and linked to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that can naturally provide for greater peace of mind. And then, we will come to how the tatma'in al-qulub is achieved, subhanAllah, the satisfaction of the hearts.
Yes.
I'm sure you will come to that shortly as well. For those of us who on daily basis, adults think, I need to make more money, because money seems to be like the perfect solution to everything. And then whether you're Muslim, Christian, atheist, what have you, we know that there are all kinds of horror stories related to excessive amount of money reaching a person suddenly. One common example being people winning the national lottery, for example, and how many of those have ended up being incredibly depressed, lost family, lost what they have prior to winning it. And that ecstatic experience is short-lived. And then actually, at times, there are individuals who go as far as saying, I wish I hadn't won in the first place. So it's trying to get the balance right. I will just remind our listeners who might have just tuned in, you are listening to Inspire 105.1 FM, 105.1 FM. This is the Community Show with me, Hafiz Muhammad Umar. And today I am joined by Sheikh Mahdi Lock, who is a co-author of a book entitled Depression and Anxiety, Causes and Treatment According to the Quran. Sheikh Mahdi is showing his book there. And our focus is around anxiety and depression as part of the bigger mental health and well-being project. So Sheikh Mahdi has beautifully given an overall summary to the introduction and the underpinning philosophy for the reason to come up with this book. And we are talking now about what some of those causes might be according to the Quran. We touched on Surah Al-Baqarah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us that Allah will test us. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And He will test us in different ways. وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ. And that's how far we kind of gone. And then the next bit, as opposed to the solution Allah gives us towards the ending of the ayah, and we will come back to that very, very shortly as well. Just to reiterate the fact that this is a pre-recorded show. I think Sheikh Mahdi is aware. One of the reasons I couldn't do this live today is because I'm currently going through bereavement. Sadly lost a sister-in-law very young, at the age of 36, unexpectedly. Please make dua for her, that Allah grants her Jannah and makes the next stages easy for her. And this is one of the tests from Allah. We know that all the children in the family were devastated, as was everybody else. And we know that when we are touched by such testing times, we turn to the Quran. And in this very ayah, if I may continue, Allah tells us, وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ, give glad tidings to those who retain sabr at that moment in time. الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ قَالُوا إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. Those when tested with such difficulties and calamities, remember that we are for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to him is our return. So that's from a bereavement kind of perspective, and we are looking at anxiety and depression from a holistic perspective. And I will ask Sheikh Mahdi to inshallah continue, and perhaps look more at a couple of ayahs you've mentioned there about causes, and what are the kind of solutions that we could perhaps seek as we head towards break very shortly, inshallah.
Okay, alhamdulillah. But I just want to comment on something you just said there, about the difference between standard of living and quality of life. I mean, I think even for people who are listening who are not Muslim, I mean, I remember one of my teachers pointed out to me, a man was not a Muslim. He was an English teacher abroad, and he lived in Japan. He taught English in Japan for a long time, and then he moved to East Africa. I think he moved to Kenya, and when he was in Japan, he had the standard of living. Right, he was on a very, very good salary and had a nice house, and there's a Japanese girlfriend and everything like that. And then he moved to Kenya for fraction of what he was earning, and he did do a video like vlogs and just talk about his life and so forth. And his subscribers, they just noticed a huge difference between how he was in Kenya and how he was in Japan. They said when he was in Kenya, he was just so much happier. Mm. I think you can see it on his face, the way he talked. It's like he wasn't so stressed, and that's the huge thing. That it's not always the same thing. Like standard of living and quality of life. It's like he was clearly having a much better time in Kenya, right? So these are things that people don't always think about. Like, oh, he's just gonna be happier because he has so much money, because he has a nice apartment, because he has a nice car. It's like no, that's not.
And the balance between the two, I think, is so crucial as well. Alhamdulillah, if you are blessed with a lot of money, and you are able to actually manage that wisely, you earned it through hard work, Allah puts barakah and Allah puts blessing in it. We're not saying that it's wrong to be wealthy. If Allah's blessed you with the best of both worlds, alhamdulillah, you're incredibly fortunate. And it's just remembering that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses you in many, many different ways. And good health is alhamdulillah blessing. Wealth is another form of blessing, but that can also be a testing time as well. If Allah has given you a lot of wealth, that poses a separate kind of challenge. And how do we actually ensure that we don't forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in every event in life? Listeners, we are coming close to a break very shortly, inshallah. But please do remain tuned in, because after the break we will continue. Sheikh Mahdi has done an introduction to his book so far, and because I am doing this pre-record on Zoom, I know we are about 20 plus minutes into the show now. I think there's a couple of more minutes remaining before we go to the break. Just as a short summary so far, the Sheikh, of the next 90 seconds or so of what we covered so far, and then inshallah we'll continue after break.
Okay, inshallah.
So if you just want to sort of like very briefly summarize what we discussed so far, Sheikh, for anybody that might have just tuned in now, and then that they know what we're talking about, they can expect after the break.
Okay, so alhamdulillah, for people just logging in or just listening in, we're just, the word is tuning in. People just tuning in. We are, we're just talking about the book, Depression and Anxiety, The Cause and True According to the Quran, a book that I co-authored with an old friend of mine, Hazm Nasser. And we're talking about the cause of depression and anxiety, and we're talking about how they are according to the Quran, and how these tend to be underlying causes, hidden causes, and these are related to the soul and to the heart, and not so much to outward things that you think about, like normal tribulations that people come across, such as a job loss or a divorce or a bereavement and these kinds of things. So we're just about to go into these 5 causes that Imam Al-Bulti talks about in the book, that obviously, because again, we're the authors, but we summarized it from a TV series by Imam Muhammad Sayyid al-Bulti from Damascus. So should I jump into those now?
You can just outline those 5 causes, and we'll go into detail after the break, inshallah.
Okay, so how much time do I have?
Another minute.
Okay, so quick thing. So the causes, number one is not knowing the reality of life. So not knowing where you come from, where you're going. Number two is fear of the future. Number three is fear of adversity and infliction. Number four is the fear of death. And then five is the inability to achieve personal ambitions. So we can go into those in more detail in the break. But what you will notice, I think, or what you might have noticed already, is that number one is kind of the root of all the other ones, right? Not knowing the reality of life is the root cause of all the other ones. So alhamdulillah, we can talk about that after the break, inshallah.
Inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Sheikh, so inshallah, bismillah, we'll continue with this after the break, and then we will have Sheikh Mahdi's input on what those causes might be, and then how they can be addressed according to the Quran and our relationship with the Quran. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all. Jazakumullah khairan. Continue listening to this program after the break, inshallah.
This program will continue after the break. Continue listening to Inspire FM. Inspire FM.
Inspire 105.1 FM.
Enjoy quality and tasty 100% authentic halal Chinese and Thai food from Gao Express. Brought to you by the team behind Top's Pizza in Luton. Choose from all your delicious Chinese and Thai favourites. Then order for delivery or collection from Gao Express in Wellington Street, Luton, Marketplace, Stevenage, and now also on Nightingale Road in Hitchin. Open daily midday till late. Find the number or order online at Gao, that's GAO, express.co.uk, or like Gao Express on Facebook.
Had an accident, a bump, trip or fall? Then you need Claims Specialists, your first choice for accident claims. The Specialist Claims Company on Dunstable Road in Luton. With excellent access to expert solicitors and on a no-win, no-fee basis, Claims Specialists use their 30 years experience to help get you the best compensation possible. For injuries at work, taxi, PCO and private hire incidents, road accidents and vehicle damage, medical negligence, plus rented housing disrepair. In short, when you need to make any claim, click on claimspecialists.co.uk or call 01582 733 222.
With you 24 hours a day. Inspire.
For the tastiest sizzling steaks around, book now for Taurus Luton Boot Street, LU1 2EP. And not just for the best grass-fed and dry-hung aged halal steaks, as Taurus Luton also serve amazing chicken dishes, burgers, sumptuous sides, salads and vegetarian options, with mouth-watering mocktails too. All this and with excellent service. View the menu, book your table, or even party or celebration event at taurusluton.co.uk or call 01582 750 213.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Isa Toy Mia. I'm from Islamic Help, and I just want to say every act of goodness is charity. So keep doing good, keep helping people, and be yourself. And stay tuned to Inspire 105.1 FM.
Whatever you're doing, if it is anything of importance, the Prophet ﷺ says, كُلُّ عَمَلٍ لَمْ يَبْدَأْ فِيهِ بِبِسْمِ اللَّهِ فَهُوَ أَقْطَعُ. Anything that you're going to do, if you haven't started it with Bismillah, the blessing will be snatched away. The goodness is snatched away.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम, मेरा नाम किरण है। कोट कश्मीर ऑर्फन्स रिलीफ ट्रस्ट मेरा एक खूबसूरत घर है, जहां मेरे साथ सैकड़ों यतीम और बेसहारा बच्चों की तालीम, तरबियत और पुरसुकून माहौल में परवरिश हो रही है, और ये सब कुछ आपके तावन से मुमकिन है। अल्लाह से दुआ है कि अल्लाह करीम आपको सदा सलामत रखे, और उम्मीद है कि आप इसी तरह अपना प्यार, मोहब्बत और तावन जारी रखेंगे। कोट UK ऑफिस 0300123774 court.org.uk.
Assalamu alaikum, this is Mariam. This is Anisa. And this is Sonia. And we are Sisters Speak.
Sisters Speak is a weekly discussion program where us girls discuss a variety of topics.
Just to give a few, our topics range from politics and education to social media and identity. So please join the discussion by tuning in to Sisters Speak. Tune in on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. on Inspire 105.1 FM. And also find us on Instagram at Sister Speak.
From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 7:30.
Listeners, welcome back to Send in the Community. I'm Hafiz Muhammad Umar, and this week I'm joined by Sheikh Mahdi Lock, who is co-author of a book called Depression and Anxiety. This is part of mental health and well-being topic this week, with a focus on depression and anxiety. And this book looks at the causes and the treatment of depression and anxiety according to the Quran. And before the break, we talked about some of those causes. And Sheikh Mahdi, if you could just reiterate those 5 causes you mentioned before the break, please, and then inshallah we can go into each of those in a bit more depth.
So number 1 was not knowing the reality of life, where you come from and where you're going. Number 2 was fear of the future. Number 3 was fear of adversity and affliction. 4 was the fear of death. And then 5 was the inability to achieve personal ambitions. So again, like I said before the break, what you might have noticed is that the first cause is the root of the other ones. So usually when I've done presentations on this book, and I've done presentations on this book up and down the UK, is when we talk about not knowing the reality of life, like this is the big major one, is what I tend to do. And I've also added more to the book. There's an appendix by Imam al-Bulti as well from another book that he did called Al-Hub fil Quran. So we try to take it right back to the root cause here, because this is all in the Quran. So what we start off with is, when we're discussing this point, is we go back to Surah Al-Araf, the 7th chapter, verse 172, where Allah gathers all the souls of humanity. And he says, Allah says, Alastu bi rabbikum? Am I not your Lord? And everyone says, Bala shahidna, right? Everyone responds and says, indeed, we bear witness. So what Imam al-Bulti talks about, and this is in the appendix, and this all ties into not knowing the reality of life. What this ties into is, he says that what this ayah tells us is that we were all once in the presence of Allah, right? In the terms of our souls, our spirits, our arwah, we were all once in the presence of Allah, and then Allah sent us into the world, and we were created, and we were given bodily form and came to this world, right? Now people might say, well, I don't remember this. Well, of course you don't remember this, right? Because what you remember is what you see and what you hear, and what you see and what you hear is what is from your eyes and your ears, which you didn't have back then. Right? But what he points out is, he says that your body doesn't remember this, but your ruh, your spirit does. And this is part of why. And a lot of people, like people who aren't even Muslim, have commented on this. They don't notice this point that, for example, like if you want to give yourself an antidepressant, like a quick one, and relieve yourself of stress and anxiety, go out somewhere where you can see a big view. Like go out into nature. Like go out, right? So go to the seaside, or go out to the mountains, go out to the countryside, and just see as far as the eye can see. And again, if you look at, just go on Google. I define one. Go on Google and type in spiritual retreat in quotation marks. Right? I don't care. I don't care who's doing it. Right? It could be Muslims, it could be Christians, it could be New Age hippies. I don't care who's doing it. Spiritual retreats always take place in somewhere in nature. Right? They take place somewhere out, again, in the countryside, the seaside, a mountain range. They don't take. They're not in a multi-story car park. Right? But this is your rule. So this is where we have to start off at this point. And Imam al-Bulti says that, he says when you look out a window and you see as far as the eye can see, that brings happiness to your ruh, because your ruh. Because the nature of your life in this world is that your ruh follows your body, but in the next life, your body follows your ruh. So when you look out to a huge view, like an open sea or a mountain range, your ruh feels happy, and your ruh says, when am I going to be free? When am I going to go back to Allah? That's that happiness that comes, right? And we saw this, like I'll be giving examples. We saw this again, like with, for example, during the COVID days with lockdowns, right? So you could be inside. People were inside, and you had everything you quote unquote needed inside. You had your food, you had your drink, you had your toilet, you had your clothes, everything you needed inside. You're running water and you're heating and whatnot. But you couldn't go outside. It wasn't sufficient. Your ruh was aching because your ruh couldn't go outside and see. So he starts with that point, and this is what I put in the presentations. I mentioned that point, and this is why even people who are not Muslim will say this. No matter how good their life is, something's always missing. Something's always missing, and that's your ruh speaking. The ruh yearns to be back with Allah, whether you acknowledge it or not, or you admit to it or not. Your ruh will always feel that something is missing. So that's the starting point. Not knowing where you're from. That's where we start. Number two on this point, and again, this is the root cause. This is why it's really important to talk about this at greater length. Is we forget as human beings where we come from, right? So that's the ruh. Now, in terms of our bodily form, Allah created Adam alayhi salam in Jannah. Allah created Adam alayhi salam in Jannah. Jannah, when this where how I was created, this is where we come from, right? Our home is Jannah, right? So this you might have seen clips on YouTube of me talking about this, because people always ask the question like, are we alone in the universe? Are there extraterrestrials? Are there aliens? It's like, yeah, extraterrestrials do exist. It's us. Right? We're not from here. We're not from planet Earth. Right? We were created, and you can look at Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 29 onwards. You can look at Surah Al-Araf, 7th chapter, verse 10 onwards, where Allah talks about this, because like before Allah talks about the creation of Adam alayhi salam, he talks about the earth, and he says, we made the earth an abode for you. So the idea is we're meant to be here. We're meant to be here, but we're not from here. This is where people, secular people, get led astray by this, because it's very clear when you look around the universe, or you look around the world, look at planet Earth. Yes, human beings, we do look like an invading force. When you fly in an airplane and you're about to land, or you take off, you look down, we do look like an invasion. Right? We've taken over natural habitats, we've taken animals out, we've laid down concrete roads, we put down buildings. It does look like that. But that doesn't mean that to that extreme, like we're a cancer on the planet, we need to be obliterated, right? That's an extremist secular view. But at the same time, we do respect it, and we honor it. Now, what I'm getting at is there are certain things within us that when we come here on Earth, when we come here to Earth, we're like immigrants, and there's certain things that we do to recreate our home, just like immigrants would do, right? Just in the same way that, someone in Bradford, you find your halal book, your halal butcher shops, and your bookstores, and your Asian clothing stores, and your masjids. That's recreating home. Now, just to give an example, something innocuous. Human beings, for example, when I've looked this up, human beings, we love botanical gardens. Do you know what I mean by botanical gardens?
Yeah, Kew Garden in London is one example. Yeah.
So botanical gardens. Botanical gardens exist in every major city, right? In the Muslim world, they're in Kuala Lumpur, they're in Cairo, they're in Copenhagen, they're in London, everywhere. Now, botanical gardens are nature, but not as nature intended, right? These are finely pruned gardens, finely groomed hedges and flowers and plants, and so forth. And there's always a water source. There's always a spring or a fountain or a river or a creek or something. It sounds a lot like Jannatin tajri min tahtiha al-anhar, right? Like Allah describes Jannah in the Quran, right? Gardens with rivers, gardens under which rivers flow. Human beings really love that. They really love that. And if they're wealthy enough, they do it themselves. They're wealthy enough to put in their own homes, right? What is that? So there's the human beings have to have that just that strong inclination towards gardens and rivers. It's like they're recreating where they come from. Now, how does this tie into depression, anxiety? Well, what else do we know about Jannah? What else we know about Jannah is that Jannah is a place of perfection. People don't die. People don't get sick. People don't go hungry. People aren't poor. So people come here. So that means that we as human beings, we question that. We say we ask people, why is it that on this planet Why is it that people get sick? Why do people go poor? Why do people go hungry? Why do people die? Why? And then secular people, they try to take it to the next step with certain, what you might call utopian movements, like Pol Pot's Cambodia or communism, like the Soviet Union. They think, okay, well, we just pass the right amount of laws, or we correct and amend the institutions. We can create this paradise on earth where everyone's taken care of, and there's no sickness, and there's no poverty, and there's no this, and it always fails, and it creates hell on earth, if anything. Right, because people forget the eye, because these are secular people who don't even know the Quran as well. But the eye that you quoted as well, like Surah Al-Baqarah 155, Allah says, "We're most assuredly going to test you with poverty, with hunger. You're going to be tested with these things." So that's another thing that ties in with depression, is that if you don't realize that you come from Jannah, you're a human being, you come from paradise, you're hardwired to perfection. And you have to let that go. You have to let that go. You have to understand that in this is an abode of tests. This is an abode of trials and tribulations. This is an abode of change. Things are constantly in flux. And when you understand that, when you understand that you are never going to have perfection in this life, you're never going to have happiness in this life, that's for the next life. And that no matter how good things are, your rule is going to be missing a law. Your rule longs for that meeting with Allah again. That prepares you to deal with the trials and tribulations of life, that you can say, okay, whatever it is that I'm seeking or that I'm hardwired towards, i.e. perfection, that's not this life. I have to let go and understand that trials and tribulations. And when you get into that habit, I've noticed this myself, my own experience, is it almost puts you in a situation where you get ready for tests. So what I mean by that is you might solve a whole bunch of problems you have, right? Like there's something you need to get fixed, there's an exam you need to do, or there's something you need to buy. You sort a whole bunch of problems, and then you realize, alhamdulillah, I've fixed all these things. And then it's like, oh, everything's done, everything's fixed. And then you have to tell yourself, some trial or tribulation is coming around the corner. You have to tell yourself and be ready for it, like because whatever good situation you're in now, it's not going to last. So you're on the lookout. Okay, where's it coming from? Where's it coming from? Who's going to test me? Who's going to travel? Like, okay, is there going to be like some sort of will it be a financial issue? Will I get in a fight with someone? What's going to happen? So when you understand that prepares you so much for what's coming, and that's what Imam Al-Buldi talks about. So that thing about not knowing the reality of life is, he says that again why a lot of people are stressed or depressed or anxious is if you don't fully understand the story of your life, the fact that Allah created you, Allah brought you into this life, then you're going to have Yawm al-Qiyamah. He said, and you're going to be judged before Allah. If you don't understand that's in itself is depressing. And he gave an example in the book. He said, if you woke up tomorrow morning and you found yourself on a beautiful 5-star train, and that train was just as long as the eye could see, and it was going through beautiful scenery and beautiful pasture, you wouldn't be happy. No matter how beautiful the train is, or how beautiful the views are, or how beautiful the services are, you'd still be wondering, where is this train going? Where did it come from? How did I get here? Where's my stop? Right. So again, that's why a lot of people, again, no matter how well they have in this life, right? Because we have these expressions like "got it made" or "he's got it all." He's got money and fame and so on and so forth. And so many of these people, especially we know from celebrities, just look up any celebrity and read about them, how they all end up in rehab. They end up on with alcohol problems and drug abuse and so forth, because they don't fully get where they're coming from and where they're going. And if you don't know that, that's going to be very stressful, in the same way that if you found yourself on some sort of train or plane and you don't know how you got there, where it's going, doesn't matter how nice it is, you're going to be stressed.
Absolutely. And I think that's exactly where you link it back to life itself and that purpose in life, and where are we going. We will continue with this, inshallah. Just for anybody who might have tuned in now, you're listening to Send in the Community with me, Hafiz Muhammad Umar. Send, as will know already, stands for Special Education Needs and Disabilities. And this week, Our topic is mental health and well-being, and we are focusing on depression and anxiety. Sheikh Mahdi is a co-author of a book called Depression and Anxiety, the causes and treatments according to the Quran, and we are currently going through those 5 different steps that have been highlighted. We mentioned the first 2. I'll ask Sheikh Mahdi to just briefly mention those first 2 again for anybody that might have missed the first part of the show so far, and move on to the third one then, please. Jazakumullah khairan.
It was actually the first cause. The first cause was not knowing the reality of life. That was what we discussed. So we discussed how your ruh, your spirit, was once in the presence of Allah, and it yearns to go back, and that's based on Surah Al-Araf, 172, the 7th chapter, verse 172. And then we also talked about the fact that we as human beings, we come from Jannah, right? So that's a place of perfection, and therefore we are hardwired to perfection. We seek perfection, we expect perfection. And this again, the fact we come from Jannah, again, this is discussed in Surah Al-Baqarah, the 2nd chapter, verse 29 onwards, and also in Surah Al-Araf, the 7th chapter, verses 10 onwards. So that's really really important to bear in mind. The second cause that comes up in the book in chapter 3 is fear of the future. So again, all these other causes I'm going to mention now, these are linked to the first cause. So fear of the future, this means that people fear about what's going to happen tomorrow or next week or next year, like what's going to happen to my job, what's going to happen to my family, what's going to happen to my business, what's going to happen to my education, and so on and so forth. And what the Imam stresses here is he stresses that you have to work and you have to keep yourself busy, and that Allah has subjugated everything for you, and that Allah is in control of everything, right? Like you can't, and this is again the point that we always understand Muslims, that whatever, there's a hadith Qudsi about this, so like whatever, it's in the Al-Ban Nawawi, I believe, the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi, is that whatever misses you is never going to hit, whatever hits you is never going to miss. Right? So you never ever open that door and say, what if? What if? What if I did this? And the Prophet ﷺ warned us about that, about saying, like if only I'd done this, only done this. That opens the door for Shaitan's handiwork. What is Shaitan's handiwork? It's depression. Because he'll play with your mind and say, if only you'd done such and such, this wouldn't have happened. Like, no, we don't accept that at all. Right? What has happened is what happened. Right? You're in this situation right now, right? Like, like what Allah will is what Allah will. There's nothing you or anyone else could have done to prevent that, right? You don't have that power to change that. So this and there's definitely ayat upon that. Like this one thing I quoted you before, Surah Al-Nahl 97, where Allah says, "A'udhu billahi shaitanir rajim, man amila salihan min dhakrin aw untha." Whoever acts rightly, male or female, being a believer, we will give them a good life. And he explains there that a good life is not, the fancy house and fancy cars. The good life is a heart that's at peace, a heart that's close to Allah, a heart that's attached to Allah, because that's the greatest blessing. The greatest blessing for human beings is to be close to Allah. And you don't know how Allah will do that to bring you closer to Him. And he says that the working, that you keep yourself busy and you work and you engage with what you have to do. And the truth is, you might not, when you're working, when you're striving, when you keep yourself busy, you might not see the fruits right away, or you might not even see the end of the tunnel. Right? And one of my presentations, I brought this story up. It was an interesting story. It's a storybook. Like the person's not a Muslim. I think it's called The Wise Horse. That's a nice storybook called The Wise Horse. I think that's what it's called. But in this storybook, there's a part where the boy is walking with the horse through a forest, and he says, I can't see my way out of the forest. I can't see my way out. And the horse says, can you see your next step? The boy said, well, yes. And the horse said, well, take that then. And just take that. And that's just beautiful advice that you don't know. Like we had this fear about the future, but can you see what step to take next? Well, take that. And then eventually everything else will open up. Right? You don't always have to see the outcome. Right? Some people try too hard to to plan their life, where they put weird expectations. They sort of say, like, I'm gonna, finish my BA at 21, I'll have my MA by 23, and then I'll have my PhD by 27, and then I'll be married, and then I'll have my house at 30, I'll have my 7 kids by the time I'm 34.
In 4 years.
Yeah. Some people do that. Some people plan their lives out so meticulously. And then when things don't go wrong, they freak out. It's like, well, who told you to plan your life out that meticulously, right? Like you have to be prepared. I'm not saying it's wrong with the plan. It's good to have a plan, to have an idea of what you want to achieve in life, but you have to be flexible. You have to allow that certain things might not work out, and you might get pushed in different directions. And when that happens, it doesn't mean that you're a failure. It doesn't mean that your plan is wrong. It doesn't. It's just the fact that you plan. Allah plans, and Allah's best of planners. That's all that means.
Absolutely. Sheikh, Jazakallah khair. We have just under 5 minutes remaining. I know we've got 3 more bits to get through. So inshallah, we'll inshallah continue.
Okay. So so these other ones, the third cause is fear of adversity and affliction, which kind of ties with the second one. And then we have the fear of death. I think I'll talk about 2 things that come up here related to all of this. Okay, maybe I'll summarize this in 3 points. Okay, so if we're talking about fear of adversity and affliction, what comes under here? Imam al-Bulti puts something interesting. He sort of slips this under this chapter of fear of adversity and affliction. He says that yes, whatever was written. You can't change that. But he brings up something else, which is interesting, which is, and this is something common for young people, which is the fear of not being forgiven. Right. So you have people out there, lots of young people, and even older people, who maybe they spent years and years and years in sin. They were remote from Allah. They weren't praying. They weren't fasting. They weren't reading Quran. They weren't committed believers, so to speak. And then they, for one reason or another, they came back to Allah, right? And they said, I need to sort myself out, right? And it could happen in old age. It could happen when they realize they no longer have the energy to do what they used to do. And I don't like to pick on people for that. I think it's a beautiful thing to see. Like when someone says, I need to go back to Allah, I need to go back to Allah. So the thing there is that Shaitan can jump into that point and say, like, oh, you really? You think you can change now? You think Allah will accept you now after everything you've done? And the response, because there's the ayat sort of the Zumar, the 39th chapter, verse 53. Allah says, "Qul ya ibadi alladhina asrafu ala anfusihim la taqnatu min rahmatillah." Right. So, all my slaves who transgress against themselves, do not despair of the mercy of Allah. And Imam al-Bulti quotes on this. He says that if Allah didn't love you, He wouldn't have called you back. But you have to tell yourself that's a sign of Allah's love for you, is that He put that in you. He put that in you to say, I need to change, right? So that's a huge thing a lot of people go through, a lot of young people, older people go through, that if you're coming back to Allah, be optimistic. You should tell yourself that, this is a sign Allah loves me. This is why I'm trying to sort myself out. Don't think, I'm such a horrible person because I was sinning for so long and I have all these prayers to make up. No, don't do that. I would jump also to the fear of death. The fear of death, I would say regarding that, in summary, is that death is not what you think it is. Death is not the be all, the end all. Death is the going back to Allah. Right? Allah is lifting that veil, because I think the verse in Surah Al-Imran, I think it's ayah 158. Allah said, وَلَن قُتِلْتُمْ لِلَّهِ تُحْشَرُونَ. Right? So if you die or you're killed, it's to Allah that you're gathered. So you have to see death as like the lifting of that veil. To Allah you're gathered. So it's like, and I mentioned sometimes in my talks and presentations, there's the beautiful hadith, the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, that when he died, because he's the Khalil of Allah, and Allah sent the angel of death to him, and Ibrahim alayhi salam, he says, "Ara'ayta khalilan yuridu an yamita khalila?" Right? Have you seen a Khalil who wants to cause his Khalil to die? Right? And Allah reveals to Ibrahim alayhi salam, He says, "Ara'ayta khalila la yuridu an yara khalila?" Right? Have you seen a Khalil who doesn't want to see his Khalil? And then Ibrahim alayhi salam, he gives up at that point, right? And then he goes to sujood, and the angel of death takes his soul. So death should never be seen that way. Like death should be seen as the reunion with Allah. And we should always have a good opinion. We should always have a good opinion of Allah as we're dying, when we're in on our deathbeds. So death is not what you think it is. But that's the beautiful point about what Allah is teaching us, is that we know how to live when we know how to die.
And Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. Thank you so much. We are into the final minute now. Listeners, you have been listening to Send in the Community with me, Hafiz Muhammad Umar. I've been delighted to have Sheikh Mahdi Lock with us, talking about mental health and well-being, and with a particular focus on depression and anxiety. If you missed the show, please catch up on it through our website on inspirefm.org. And it has been an amazing session here. Sheikh, Jazakumullah khair. Just the final 30 seconds for you to give us a very brief summary at the end. Any final words for this show, inshallah?
Okay, well, final thing I would say to you is read Surah Al-Baqarah, because remember the Quran here, Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 216. And always understand that Allah knows that, because the core of that ayah, Surah Al-Baqarah, the second chapter, verse 216, is that Allah knows what is khair for you. That's my final message to you. Allah knows khair for you. So whatever you're going through, whatever trials you're going through, always remember that something could be good for you, but it's actually, you think something's good for you, but it's actually bad for you. You think something's bad for you, it's actually good for you. And Allah knows what is khair for you. So put your trust in Allah, and everything will work out the best. And the greatest blessing is nearness to Allah, and that's what Allah is trying to do to you.
Absolutely. Jazakumullah khair, Sheikh. Thank you so much for your time. That was Sheikh Mahdi. You'll be listening to Send in the Community. Tune in next week, inshallah, bi'izn ta'ala, the same time on Wednesday, 7 till 8 p.m. Jazakumullah khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Coming up next, English Talk Series. Continue listening to Inspire FM. Inspire FM.
A large and elegant wedding and events venue in the heart of Luton, catering for up to 1,200 guests, with a 5-star food hygiene rating, plenty of parking, bridal suite, family rooms and prayer facilities. Crescent Hall's the perfect venue for your wedding, events, parties and conferences. We have some great offers for summer. Contact us to find out more. Call 01582 723386. Email bookings@crescenthall.co.uk or search for us online and social media. Crescent Hall, Luton. Conditions apply.
आइडियल प्रॉपर्टीज 20 साल से आपकी खिदमत में पेश आपकी प्रॉपर्टी की सारी जिम्मेदारी अब हमारी। हम अच्छी तरह से जांच पड़ताल करके किराएदार डालते हैं और आपको किराया बर वक्त गारंटी के साथ दिलवाते हैं। अगर आप प्रॉपर्टी किराए पर लेने या फरोख्त करने का सोच रहे हैं तो आज ही हमारे तजुर्बाकार माहिरीन से राब्ता कीजिए 01582